The storm struck without warning, turning the Wyoming sky black as coal and unleashing sheets of rain that hammered the earth with relentless fury. Samuel Hayes stood at his cabin window, watching lightning split the darkness as thunder rolled. Across his 1,000-acre ranch, like the hoofbeats of wild horses. For 10 years, he had lived alone on this land, carved from the wilderness with his own 2 hands. 10 years of silence broken only by the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the pines. 10 years of trying to forget the woman who had torn his heart from his chest and left him bleeding in the dust of a Denver street. The knock came soft at first, barely audible above the storm's rage. Samuel paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. No one traveled this far from town in weather like this. The knock came again, more urgent now, followed by a sound that made his blood run cold. A woman's cry for help. He threw open the door, and there she was, collapsed on his porch like a broken angel. Her wedding dress, once white as fresh snow, now clung to her trembling form, soaked through and stained with mud. Dark hair plastered to her pale face, and when she looked up at him with those green eyes he knew so well, Samuel Hayes felt his carefully constructed world crumble. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, "help me." It was Elizabeth. After 10 years of silence, 10 years of wondering if she was alive or dead, happy or miserable, she had come back to him on the worst night of his life for perhaps the best. Without a word, he scooped her into his arms, feeling how light she had become, how fragile. Her head fell against his shoulder as he carried her inside, and for a moment he was 25 again, holding the only woman he had ever loved. The woman who had promised to marry him before she vanished into the night with another man. Samuel laid her gently on his bed, the only bed in the one-room cabin, and covered her with every blanket he owned. Her lips had turned blue from the cold, and violent shivers racked her small frame. He built up the fire until the cabin glowed warm and orange, then put water on to boil for tea. "Why?" he asked quietly, not looking at her. "Why now?" Elizabeth pulled the blankets tighter around herself, but Samuel could see her watching him in the mirror above his washstand. "I ran," she said, her voice stronger now but still trembling. "I couldn't go through with it." "Go through with what?" As he asked, he knew. The wedding dress told the whole story. Marrying him. He's marrying Charles Whitmore. Samuel's jaw tightened. Whitmore, the railroad baron's son, heir to a fortune built on the backs of men like Samuel's father, who had died laying track in the Colorado mountains. The same Charles Whitmore who had stolen Elizabeth away 10 years ago with promises of silk dresses and fine houses. Bit late for second thoughts, isn't it? Samuel's words came out harder than he intended. Elizabeth flinched as if he had struck her. "You don't understand. I never wanted to marry him. Not then, not now." Then why? Samuel stopped himself. He had asked this question 1,000 times in the dark hours of the night, and no answer could ease the ache in his chest. "Oh, my father was dying," she said quietly. "He owed Whitmore's father more money than we could ever repay. Charles said he would forgive the debt if I married him. He said he would take care of my mother and my little sister." Samuel turned to face her then, seeing the tears streaming down her cheeks. "So you chose them over me." "I chose them over myself," she corrected. "I never stopped loving you, Samuel, not for a single day in 10 years. The words hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Don't say that. It's true. I wrote you letters, hundreds of them, but I never sent them. Knew you must hate me." "I did hate you," he said, his voice rough. "Years I hated you. I hated you for leaving, for not trusting me enough to find another way. No, I hated you for making me love you so much that no other woman could ever compare." Elizabeth sobbed, pulling the blankets over her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Samuel." Wanted to go to her, to hold her, and tell her it was all right, that love could conquer the years of pain and separation. But the hurt ran too deep. 10 years was a long time to nurse a broken heart. "What happened today?" he asked instead. "Why did you run?" Elizabeth lowered the blankets, her green eyes red from crying. "This morning, as I was putting on my wedding dress, Charles came to my room. He was drunk and he said, ... She shuddered. "He said things about our wedding night that made my skin crawl. Then he grabbed me, tried to force himself on me right there. Said I belonged to him now, that he had bought and paid for me. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. Did he hurt you? I fought him off and ran. I took his horse and rode as hard as I could. I don't know why I came here. I just... I remembered this place from when we used to dream about building a life together. I remembered how safe I felt with you. The storm outside seemed to echo the turmoil in Samuel's heart. Part of him wanted to saddle up and ride to town to find Charles Whitmore and make him pay for laying hands on Elizabeth. But another part of him, the part that had been wounded and scarred by her abandonment, whispered that this was not his fight anymore. You can't stay here, he said finally. Come morning, they'll come looking for you. Whitmore has enough money and influence to make trouble for anyone who helps you. I know. Elizabeth's voice was small. I just need one night. Please, Samuel. Just until the storm passes? He nodded curtly and turned back to the stove, busying himself with making tea. But he could feel her eyes on him. Memories flooded back unbidden, memories of lazy summer afternoons by the creak of stolen kisses. Under the cottonwood trees of nights when they lay in each other's arms and planned their future together. Do you remember? Elizabeth said softly. The day you asked me to marry you? Samuel's hands stilled on the teapot. Of course he remembered. It was burned into his memory like a brand. We were by Miller's Creek, she continued. You had been acting strange all day, nervous and excited. When you finally got down on one knee and pulled out your grandmother's ring, I thought my heart would burst with happiness. Elizabeth, don't. You said you would love me until the stars fell from the sky. You said you would build me a house where we could raise our children and grow old together. That was a long time ago. But even as he said it, Samuel could feel the old emotions stirring like embers that had never quite died. I still have the ring, she whispered. Samuel spun around. What? Elizabeth reached into the bodice of her wedding dress and pulled out a small object wrapped in silk. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a simple gold band set with a tiny diamond, his grandmother's engagement ring. The one his father had saved for months to buy back from the pawn shop after his mother died. I couldn't bear to give it back, she said. I've worn it on a chain around my neck every day for 10 years. It was the only piece of you I had left. Samuel stared at the ring, remembering how it had looked on her finger, how she had held it up to catch the sunlight and laughed with pure joy. Why didn't you come to me before you left with him? Why didn't you tell me about your father's debts? You could have found another way. Because I knew you would try to help, and you would have lost everything. Your ranch, your dreams, maybe even your life. Whitmore Sr. was a ruthless man. He would have destroyed you to get to me, so you destroyed me instead. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of pain. Elizabeth clutched the ring to her chest, tears flowing freely now. I thought if I left quickly, cleanly, you would forget about me eventually. I thought you would find someone else, someone who could make you happy. There was no one else, Samuel said quietly. How could there be? You didn't just take my heart. When you left Elizabeth, you took my ability to love anyone else. They fell into silence. The only sounds, the crackling of the fire and the storm raging outside. Samuel poured tea into 2 cups and brought one to Elizabeth, careful not to let their fingers touch when she took it from him. Tell me about your life, he said, settling into the chair across from her. Tell me about these 10 years. Elizabeth sipped her tea, her hands still shaking slightly. There's not much to tell. Charles kept me like a prize bird in a gilded cage. I had beautiful dresses and jewels, a fine house with servants, but I was never allowed to go anywhere alone. He was always afraid I would run away. She laughed bitterly. I suppose he was right to be afraid. Were you? Did you love him at all? No, I tried to, for my family's sake. But I could never feel anything for him but gratitude mixed with resentment. He knew it too. That's why he was so possessive, so controlling. He could buy my presence, but he could never buy my heart. Studied her face in the firelight. Seeing the lines of sadness that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the way her eyes had lost some of their sparkle. What about children? Elizabeth's face crumpled. I lost 3 babies over the years. Charles blamed me each time, said I was too delicate, too weak. The doctor said. The doctor said the stress and unhappiness were likely to blame. Samuel's heart clenched. He had always pictured Elizabeth with children, her maternal instincts strong even as a young woman. The thought of her suffering through such losses alone made him want to pull her into his arms and never let go. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "Thank you." She set down her teacup and looked around the cabin. "This is exactly how I imagined it would be. Simple and warm and peaceful. You've built a good life here, Samuel. It's a lonely life, but a free one that's worth something." We talked through the night as the storm raged outside, sharing stories of the years that had separated them. Samuel told her about building his ranch from nothing, about the hard winters and the cattle drives, about the satisfaction of making something with his own hands. Elizabeth spoke of her gilded prison, of charity work that had been her only escape, of reading books and dreaming of the life she might have had. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to subside. Through the window, they could see the first gray light of morning creeping across the sky. "They'll come looking for me soon," Elizabeth said, her voice heavy with resignation. Samuel stood and began pacing the small cabin. "Where will you go?" "I don't know. I have a little money saved, hidden from Charles. Maybe California or Oregon, somewhere he can't find me. You can't travel alone. It's dangerous. I'll manage. I've managed for 10 years. But even as she said it, Samuel could see the fear in her eyes. A woman alone on the frontier faced countless dangers, and Charles Whitmore had the resources to hire men to track her down. A sound from outside made them both freeze the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Samuel grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and moved to the window. Through the gray dawn light, he could see a group of riders approaching at full gallop. "It's them," Elizabeth whispered, her face white with terror. Samuel counted 6 men, led by a figure he recognized even at a distance, Charles Whitmore himself, his expensive clothes and silver-trimmed saddle marking him as clearly as a brand. Behind him rode what looked like hired guns, rough men with the hard eyes of killers. "Get dressed," Samuel said quietly. Quickly, Elizabeth scrambled from the bed, still wrapped in blankets. "Samuel, I won't let them hurt you because of me. I'll go with them, like hell you will." Samuel's voice was steel. "This is my land, and no man tells me who I can and cannot help." The riders pulled up in front of the cabin, their horses snorting and stamping in the muddy yard. Charles Whitmore dismounted, his handsome face twisted with rage and something darker. "Hayes," he shouted, "I know she's in there. Send out my bride, and there won't be any trouble." Samuel opened the door, but kept his rifle ready. "There's no bride here, Whitmore. Just a woman seeking shelter from the storm." Charles laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't play games with me, ranch hand. I've been tracking that horse for hours. Elizabeth belongs to me, and I mean to have her back." "No one belongs to anyone," Samuel said steadily. "And this is my property. You're trespassing." "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." Charles stepped closer, his hand resting on the pearl handle of his pistol. "I own half this territory, including the bank that holds the mortgage on this pathetic little spread. One word from me, and you'll lose everything." Samuel felt Elizabeth move up behind him, her presence giving him strength. Some things are worth losing everything for. Charles's eyes narrowed as he saw Elizabeth appear in the doorway behind Samuel. She had dressed in her wedding gown again. Was the only clothes she had, but she held her head high, with a dignity that made her beautiful despite the stained and torn fabric. "There's my blushing bride," Charles said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Come along, darling. Our guests are waiting." "I'm not going with you, Charles," Elizabeth said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I'm not marrying you." "Oh, but you are." Charles drew his pistol, pointing it not at Elizabeth, but at Samuel. "You see, my dear, you have a choice. You can come with me now and be my loving wife, or I can kill your former lover and then drag you back anyway. Either way, you're leaving." With me, Samuel raised his rifle, but Charles's men had their weapons drawn as well. 6 against 1, the odds were not in his favor. "Don't do this, Charles," Elizabeth pleaded. "Let him go." "I'll come with you, but let Samuel live." "No," the word came from Samuel's lips like a gunshot. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself again. Not for me, not for anyone." For a moment, time seemed suspended. The 6 armed men, Samuel with his rifle, Elizabeth caught between them. It was a tableau of violence waiting to explode. Then Elizabeth stepped forward, placing herself between Samuel and Charles's gun. "If you want me, Charles, you'll have to kill me first, because I would rather die than spend another day as your prisoner." Charles's face went purple with rage. "You ungrateful little..." The lady said no. The new voice came from behind Charles's group, and everyone turned to see Sheriff Tom Bradley riding up with 3 deputies. The lawman's badge caught the morning light as he dismounted, his own weapon drawn. "Sheriff Bradley," Charles said, forcing his voice back to its usual smooth tone. "This is a private matter. My bride suffered from pre-wedding nerves and ran away. I'm simply collecting what belongs to me." "Funny thing about that," the sheriff said, moving closer. "I got a visit from Dr. Morrison early this morning. Seems he patched up Miss Elizabeth here about 6 months ago after she took a nasty fall down some stairs. Of course, he's seen a lot of women with similar injuries over the years, and he's got some strong opinions about men who push their women downstairs." Charles's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "You can't prove anything." "Maybe not in court," Sheriff Bradley said, "but I can arrest you for trespassing on private property with armed men. That's a serious crime in these parts." The standoff stretched on, 6 guns against 4, with Elizabeth and Samuel caught in the middle. Samuel could feel the tension building, like the pressure before a storm, and he knew that one wrong word could turn the dawn into a bloodbath. Then Elizabeth spoke, her voice carrying across the yard with surprising strength. "Charles, look at yourself. Look at what you've become. You're threatening to murder an innocent man because you can't accept that someone doesn't love you. Is this really the man you want to be?" For a moment, something flickered in Charles's eyes, shame, perhaps, or the ghost of the better man he might have been, but it passed quickly, replaced by cold rage. "You made me into this," he snarled. 10 years of your coldness, your rejection, your obvious disgust every time I touched you. You owe me, Elizabeth. You owe me a lifetime of debt, and I mean to collect. The debt is paid," Samuel said quietly. "She gave you 10 years of her life. That's more than you deserved." Charles whirled on him, his pistol swinging toward Samuel's chest. "You think you can just take what's mine? You think you can steal my bride and live happily ever after?" "She was never yours," Samuel replied. "Love can't be bought or owned or forced. It can only be given freely, and she never gave her love to you. Then she'll give it to no one." Charles's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, Elizabeth threw herself forward, her hand striking his arm. The shot went wild, the bullet splintering the cabin's doorframe inches from Samuel's head. In the chaos that followed, Sheriff Bradley and his deputies moved with practiced efficiency. Charles's hired guns found themselves outnumbered and outflanked. Their employer disarmed and face down in the mud before they could react. "Charles Whitmore," the sheriff said formally, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon." As the deputies led Charles away, he looked back at Elizabeth with eyes full of hatred and thwarted possession. "This isn't over," he called. "I'll destroy you both for this. You'll never have a moment's peace." But his words seemed to lose power in the morning air. Elizabeth felt something she hadn't experienced in 10 years, the lightness of true freedom. When the last of the riders had disappeared down the trail, Samuel and Elizabeth found themselves alone again, standing in the muddy yard as the sun finally broke through the storm clouds. "It's really over," Elizabeth whispered, as if afraid to believe it. Samuel nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. No, he meant what he said about making trouble. He has the power to make life difficult for both of us. Then we'll face it. "Together," Elizabeth said, reaching for his hand. "If you'll have me. I know I hurt you terribly, and I know 10 years is a long time to expect someone to wait. But if there's any chance, it's any possibility, that you could forgive me," Samuel silenced her with a kiss. 10 years of longing and loss and love pouring out in that single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. "Forgave you years ago," he said softly. "Just forgot how to stop being angry." "But Elizabeth, are you sure?" "Charles was right about one thing. I can't offer you the life of luxury you've known. This ranch is everything I have, and it's not much." Elizabeth looked around at the simple cabin, the rolling pastures, the mountains rising in the distance painted gold by the morning sun. "It's everything I ever wanted," she said. "A home built on love instead of fear, freedom instead of golden chains. A man who sees me as a partner, not a possession." Samuel pulled his grandmother's ring from his pocket. Elizabeth had dropped it during the confrontation, and he had quietly retrieved it. "Then marry me," he said. "Not because of debts or obligations or family pressure, but because we choose each other freely." Elizabeth held out her hand, tears streaming down her face as Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger where it belonged. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the little church in town, with Sheriff Bradley standing as Samuel's best man and half the territory in attendance. Elizabeth wore a simple blue dress that she had sewn herself. She had never looked more beautiful. Charles Whitmore had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for his crimes. His father's attempts to cause trouble for the newlyweds had been thwarted by the testimony of several other women who came forward with their own stories of abuse at the hands of the Whitmore men. As the years passed, Samuel and Elizabeth built a life that was everything they had dreamed of as young lovers. The ranch prospered. They raised 3 healthy children who filled the house with laughter, and they never took a single day of their happiness for granted. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, remembering the stormy night that had brought them back together. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked one evening, his arm around his wife as she rested her head against his shoulder. "Giving up all that wealth and comfort?" Elizabeth smiled, her hand finding his in the gathering darkness. "How can I regret gaining everything I ever truly wanted? I was rich in things, but poor in joy. Now I'm rich in love, and that's worth more than all the gold in California." Their children played in the yard, their voices carrying on the evening breeze, and Samuel thought about the strange ways of fate that had torn them apart, only to bring them back together when the time was right. Sometimes love required patience, forgiveness, and the courage to believe in second chances. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Samuel kissed his wife's forehead and whispered the same words he had spoken to her on their wedding day, words he would continue to speak until his dying breath: "I will love you until the stars fall from the sky." And under that vast western sky, surrounded by the life they had built together, Elizabeth knew that some promises were worth waiting a lifetime to see fulfilled. The end came not with thunder and storm, but with the gentle peace of 2 hearts, finally finding their home in each other, proving that true love, like the stars above, endures through the darkest nights and shines brightest when it seems most lost in the distance. A coyote called to the moon, and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying their story across the endless frontier where legends are born and love conquers all.